If you tried to scam a dying man out of all of his money, only to find out that that man was Jigsaw himself, what would you do? In the hopes of curing his cancer, John seeks out an off-the-grid organization for treatment, but quickly learns that everything isn't as it seems. These bunch of scammers just picked the wrong guy to mess with, and by the time that John's done with them, they're going to wish that they'd never crossed paths. We're here to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the revenge death game in Saw X. We pick up shortly after the events of Saw 1, with our anti-hero John Kramer, better known by his press-appointed alias Jigsaw, at a pivotal moment in his life. After being diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, John enters a series of tests, desperate for a chance at a cure. But the hard truth is that it's not looking good. The doctor says that he's only got a few months left to live at best. His advice is to enjoy what time he still has, and find peace by accepting his fate. But John here just isn't that type of guy. While leaving the hospital, John notices this janitor stealing valuables from an unconscious patient, and the medical equipment gives him an idea. The next thing that he knows, the janitor wakes up in one of Jigsaw's traps, and now it's time for the first game. He's been restrained to a chair with a mask placed over his face that has two long tubes attached to a vacuum placed directly over his eyes. His right hand has been placed into a strange contraption, and his left hand is holding a dial with the numbers 1 through 5. He'll have to turn the dial, snapping each of his fingers one by one before the 60-second timer runs out. Otherwise, the trap will activate, sucking both of his eyes straight out of his skull. The timer starts, and he quickly begins to panic. Terrified, he finally turns the dial to the first position, snapping his pinky finger straight up at a 90-degree angle. The janitor screams out in pain, but time is quickly running out, so he turns the dial to the second and third position, mutilating his fingers in the process. He only has 2 more to go, but the pain becomes unbearable, and the man freezes up just as the timer runs out. Suddenly, the vacuum turns to full power, and both of his eyes are forcibly pulled out through the tubes, killing him. That makes 1 down, with 5 more to go. Okay, it's Jigsaw time, and it looks like this guy's finally seeing the error of his ways. He just got both of his eyes sucked out like drinking boba tea through a straw. That's a terrifying way to go out for sure, and it may be too late for our janitor, but this was essentially one of the easiest games to win. Here's something that you've probably never thought about. Could you survive having both of your eyes yanked out by a vacuum? This trap is so dangerous because your eyes are connected to your body by several different vital structures. The white outer layer of your eye, called the sclera, is attached to 6 extraocular muscles, which allow your eye to rotate up and down and from side to side. At the back of each eye, you have a long bundle of sensory fibers called your optic nerve. These nerves intersect at the optic chiasm and then connect directly to your brain. It's definitely possible to survive having your eyes popped out, but it's going to depend on how much material comes with them, the rate of blood loss, and how quickly you're able to get medical attention. In cases of severe blood loss, the average time before a person succumbs to their injuries is less than 5 minutes. So unless Jigsaw set up this trap in the basement of a hospital, the odds aren't looking good for the janitor here. And just like with any Jigsaw trap, the most critical thing that you need to do if you want to survive is prioritize the threats. In this case, it's his eyes being sucked out by the vacuum that's going to kill him. So finding a way to remove or disable that mask or break the vacuum would be all that he needs to do to survive. The problem is that with both of his hands restrained, I just don't see a viable way for him to do that. Whether you're playing by the rules or looking for an alternate way out, you never want to wait too long to act during one of Jigsaw's traps. Once the timer starts counting down, you only have a matter of minutes before you suffer a brutal death. So the best choice is to quickly think of any possible alternate solutions. And if nothing comes to mind, you have to fully commit getting it done the old-fashioned way. With no way to move and time quickly running out, it looks like this guy's only option was to play by the rules. On the bright side, at least he's only breaking his fingers and not having to go to some more extreme measures like some of the other tests that Jigsaw has set up. It's not an easy choice by any means, but I'd rather endure the temporary pain of snapping a few fingers than being killed in such a terrifying way. His best bet here would probably have been to just treat it like taking off a band-aid and quickly zip through all 5 fingers in one motion, never giving himself the time to feel the pain and start to panic. Making it more than halfway through just to die in the end is pretty much the worst possible outcome. But the truth is that everything with this trap isn't quite as straightforward as it seems. Alright, so about this trap. It turns out that it was all a dream, just like Biggie Smalls. In reality, the janitor notices some old guy watching him and quickly decides to put it all back. John tells him that this was a good choice, but his next victims won't be so lucky. As luck would have it, John runs into a man named Henry, who he recognizes from his cancer support group. It turns out that he found a doctor who was able to cure his cancer to the point that he's now in full remission. It was risky and expensive, but Henry says that it was worth every penny. Since the treatment isn't approved by the FDA, he says that he had to travel overseas to Norway for his procedure, but gives John a link where he can find more information and wishes him the best of luck. That night, John manages to get in contact with the doctor, Cecilia, who says that if he can get down to Mexico next week, they can fit him in for the surgery. Thrilled at the good news, John eagerly accepts, but that was his biggest mistake. After landing at the airport, he meets up with the clinic's driver, Diego, who takes him to the secluded villa where Cecilia and her team are waiting. Once there, he meets a young woman named Gabriella, and finally Cecilia herself. She brings him to a special operation room hidden deep within the compound, where she introduces him to her anesthesiologist, Matteo, and nurse, Valentina, who will be a part of the team for his surgery the next day. He also meets another patient, Parker Sears, who's currently being treated for thyroid cancer and seems to be having great success. It's a long process, but the surgery goes well. He'll need to take a special combination of medications twice a day for the next week, and once he's finished, he'll be well on his road to recovery 100% cancer-free. Feeling like a new man with a second lease on life, John grabs a bottle of tequila from the store as a way to thank Gabriella, but when he returns to the villa, something seems wrong. There are no signs of Gabriella or her family anywhere in sight, and the surgery room is completely trashed. On the table, there's a DVD player showing a brain surgery demonstration that looks an awful lot like what he saw on the screen during his own procedure. That's when he realizes the shocking truth. He never got surgery at all, because the whole thing was a scam from start to finish. Furious, John sets out on his path for revenge, starting with the taxi driver Diego. After tracking the man down at a popular tourist site, he knocks him out with a chloroform rag and drags him back to the factory for his first game. When Diego wakes up, he finds himself tied to a pole with 2 surgical scalps taped to his hands. Panicking, he uses the scalpels to cut himself loose, but when he steps forward, he pulls out a pin that he hadn't noticed until now, activating the 2 explosive devices that are strapped to his arms. A tape player explains that he'll need to cut the explosives off using the scalpels before the timer runs out. Otherwise, it's bye-bye Dr. Diego. The man scrambles around the factory, desperately trying to find another way to save himself, but it's no use. With time quickly running out, he starts cutting away at the skin on his left arm, and actually manages to remove the device, kicking it to the other side of the room, but there's still one more to go, and only 30 seconds left on the clock. Fighting through the pain, Diego cuts away the second device with only seconds left to spare, diving for cover just as the explosives detonate. He's in pure agony, but he's actually managed to survive, and John rushes down to tend to his wounds now that he's passed the test. That makes 1 scammer who gets to live, with 4 more to go. Okay, that was a close call, but it looks like Diego here clutched it in the end. It's hard to feel happy for a guy who's been scamming dying people out of their money, but he handled that like a champ once he committed to getting it done, so credit where credit's due, I guess. Here's the thing about Diego. The truth is that he made his first mistake before the trap even started. And I'm not talking about the obvious one of scamming John Kramer. Scamming people on their deathbed is wrong for so many reasons, but even after being kidnapped for revenge, he still had no idea that John was actually an evil genius in disguise. So there's no way that he could have seen something like this coming. Where he went wrong, though, is by telling John what he wanted to know. Before the game started, Diego said that he'd told John who he was working for, as in giving him the identities and locations of the rest of the scammers. But this was a big mistake. That knowledge was probably his one and only bargaining chip here, since he's the only one of the scammers who John was able to actually track down. If John put him in a trap and risked killing him before getting that information, then he'd risk never finding the others, and he clearly wants to get his revenge on them all. The smarter thing for Diego to do here would have been to withhold that information for as long as possible by doing something like dropping the names only one at a time. Once John had everything that he needed, this guy was no longer of any use to him, meaning that now his death game could begin. Not spilling all of the beans right away would have made things more complicated for John, and thereby extended his usefulness, allowing him to stay alive and well for as long as possible, which would hopefully give him time to find another way to escape. Now, once this guy woke up and realized that he was in a death trap, he immediately went into a total panic. That's completely understandable in his situation, but we have the luxury of being able to think this through one step at a time. The first step when you realize that you're in a jigsaw trap is to always freeze in place and carefully observe everything about your surroundings. He had explosives rigged to his arms, but they didn't actually activate until he pulled away from his original position. If he'd noticed that this was how the game worked, then he could have always just tried staying put for as long as possible in the hopes that some help might eventually be coming, and only make his next move when he felt like he had no other choice. The next step would be to somehow try stopping the pipe bombs from ever activating. John may have said that his scalpels can't cut through the steel wire, but that wouldn't have stopped me from at least giving it a quick try, because if you can stop the pins from being pulled out, then you immediately eliminate the danger. The wires also seem to be connected to the railing or post somewhere behind him, so maybe he could find a weak point where they connect and attempt to cut them free, thereby allowing him to step away from the railing without pulling the pins. This would really take some thinking, but since the bomb's timers didn't start until he pulled away, maybe he could have stayed right there and cut them out of his arms just as the trap was intended, but without adding the pressure of a ticking clock, leaving him with as much time as he needed to cut the bombs off and get free. Alternatively, he could observe the explosives themselves and see if there was some way that he could damage them to prevent them from activating, such as by cutting an exposed wire or attempting to somehow deactivate the timer. Although this would be incredibly dangerous to try without knowing what you were doing, because one wrong move could end up with the devices exploding and blowing his arms off. It might also have been possible to use the scalpels to cut through the duct tape and get his hands free before starting the timer. This would have given him more freedom to manipulate the explosives and possibly find a way to disarm them before they were activated. He may cut it close, but in the end, Diego here got the job done, which puts him in an elite class of hardcore survivors who've actually managed to finish one of Jigsaw's games and escape with their life. So I can't argue with the results here. Hopefully he learned his lesson so he won't have to come back for another round in the sequel. It's time to round up the rest of the contestants, so John calls in a favor from his two associates back at home. After getting their locations from Diego, he's able to track down the others with ease. Last but not least comes the good doctor herself, who he ambushes while alone at her mansion. The woman runs to her car to escape, but John himself pops up from the back seat, injecting her with a dose of tranquilizer. Before she passes out, he introduces her to his partner, Amanda Young, a former test survivor turned Jigsaw apprentice, who's going to be helping with their games. The scammers wake up back in the factory and begin to freak out when they realize that each of them are strapped to their own personalized death trap. That's when John enters the room carrying a strange device and a notebook, saying that it's time for their game to begin. Terrified, Matteo tries to throw the doctor under the bus, insisting that this was all her fault. But unfortunately for him, it's too little too late, and John here isn't buying his story for a second. Instead, he starts lecturing them like an angry teacher who just came back to a bad note from a substitute, laying into them for taking advantage of dying people's hope, the only thing that they had left. The The doctor here swears that he was their only victim, but John brought the receipts. In total, they've scammed 34 people over the course of 8 years, pocketing more than $8 million cash for all their own personal gain, which John now has hidden in the observation room upstairs. Valentina will be up first, and Amanda tells her to pay close attention to the rules if she wants to live. She's been tied up with rope to a sturdy metal pipe, with a wire saw running through a system of pulleys placed level with her neck. In order to survive, she'll need to use a similar medical device called a Jigsaw to slice her own leg down to the bone. They've given her a sort of vacuum device that she'll need to use to extract 3 ounces of bone marrow before the timer runs out. Otherwise, the trap will activate, cutting off her head. After giving her the instructions, John and Amanda go up to their observation room, and it's time for Valentina's test to begin. Okay, it looks like these people are totally screwed, and to be honest, they deserve it, but if they're going to survive, they need to think quickly before they miss out on an important opportunity here. Right now, it's about to be Valentina's turn, and it seems like this time John is going one by one. While she's being put to the test, the others should take this time to try figuring out what their trap is, and start thinking of ways to survive it. I'd start by searching around the room as far as I was able to move, because they might find tools that they could use to get themselves free while John and Amanda aren't looking, or possibly even weapons that they could use to get the jump on them. If they're feeling helpful, they might even be able to help Valentina turn off her trap since it was only activated by 2 buttons. There's pretty much no way that John left any of them enough slack in their restraints to physically get to her, but if they found something like a long enough piece of metal and threw it over, there's a small chance that she could use it to reach across and push the buttons, turning off the device herself, or even find some way to damage the pulley system that's ultimately going to cut off her head. Of course, this would only be a temporary solution until John and Amanda came to turn it back on, but anything that they can do to slow the process down only increases their chances of surviving long enough for help to get there. Whatever they do, not taking this chance to get any advantage that they can would be a wasted opportunity. But for Valentina here, her time is about to run out. The others hype Valentina up as best as they can, and she finally takes the saw from the box, starting the countdown. The girl is absolutely terrified, but the doctor walks her through step by step, explaining how to tourniquet her leg with a belt before getting started. With the tourniquet in place, Valentina wraps the saw around her leg and begins getting to work, sawing faster and faster through the unbearable pain with only a minute left on the clock, until she's finally able to cut all the way through her leg. The hard part is over, and now all that she has to do is get to the marrow. But time is quickly running out. Screaming in agony, she jams the vacuum into her bone, nearly passing out from the pain as the device begins to fill. She's just seconds from escape, but took too long to get started, and just then, the timer runs out. Suddenly, the pulleys activate, drawing the wire closer and slicing her head clean off. That makes 1 scammer down, with 3 more to go. Okay, I've heard of surgery costing an arm and a leg, but this is just ridiculous. This trap is terrifying, but just like all of the others, the best chance at coming up with a solution that doesn't involve amputating a limb is to approach the problems one at a time. Now, before the test even started, John said that if they didn't play, then they'll be stuck there forever. And personally, I'd rather take my chances with that. Without access to water, they'd still have up to 3 days before they died of dehydration. So instead of rushing into it, I'd take as much time as possible to start trying to come up with another way out of the trap that didn't require losing my leg. If he ends up forcing them to play, then that's one thing. But until that moment, I wouldn't be in any sort of hurry to get things started. Let's say that waiting wasn't an option at all, and her only choice was to play. As always, we need to start by prioritizing the threats, and the immediate danger here is the wire that's going to cut her head off once the timer runs out. This means that if she's going to survive without playing by the rules, then Valentina here needs to find a way to either stop the saw or avoid it. From the moment that she woke up, she should have started pulling on the rope to gradually loosen it, even just a little bit. Over time, she may have have been able to get it loose enough to slip her head out. Who knows? She could have tried to reach behind her and start untying the knot in the rope, or even put the Jigsaw through and cut the rope with it instead of her leg. Maybe she could have even used the saw to cut the wire that was going to decapitate her. That seems like too easy of an out, but you never know until you try, right? Another thing to note about the way that the trap works is that the blood goes through the filter while the marrow catches onto it, weighing it down. If someone tossed her something with a long enough reach, she could use it to weigh the scale down herself, possibly setting herself free. It's going to be a tough shot to make, but she could even possibly throw the little box that the saw came in onto the scale to achieve the same outcome. But let's say that after everything she could think of, her only choice was to cut off her leg. It's brutal, but if it's your only way out, then the key here is to not waste any time. The thigh contains the femoral artery, one of the most critical blood vessels in the body. Severing this artery can lead to severe blood loss, which can quickly cause the victim to go into hypervolemic shock. When the heart is unable to get enough of the blood to the rest of the body, your organs quickly begin to shut down, and the victim can die in a matter of minutes. 1 in 5 people who go into a state of shock never recover, and as we said before, it only takes less than 5 minutes for a person to die of blood loss. So acting quickly would have been the only way to save her life. To make matters even worse, cutting off her own leg was only half the battle. Extracting bone marrow can be extremely painful, which is why patients are given anesthesia when this is done as a medical procedure. This pain could cause her to slip into unconsciousness, and that could be a death sentence if it means that she's unable to control her blood loss. The trap didn't actually start until she took the saw, so to save time, she could have put the tourniquet on first, giving her a head start. Once the countdown was on, her only choice was to act quickly and fully commit. Valentina actually came extremely close to making it through this one, but she hesitated for too long only to end up going through with it, and would have survived if she committed earlier. That's easier said than done, of course, but if it's the choice that you're making, you need to see it through. After all, the guy from 127 Hours cut his own arm off using a friggin' pocket knife. So with an actual surgical tool, it should definitely be doable as long as you can endure the pain. On the bright side, at least she got decapitated, which is a less painful death than some of her other victims got. Back in the day, the guillotine was actually one of the preferred ways to go out for those sentenced to capital punishment. So it could definitely be worse, I guess. It looks like Valentina ultimately got what she deserved in the end, but maybe the others will actually make it out in time. Down in the testing room, the doctor's phone suddenly begins to ring, but it's too far out of reach for her to get to it in time. Realizing that John and Amanda aren't looking, she comes up with a clever idea. After finding a sharp piece of metal on the floor nearby, she uses it to slice open Valentina's stomach, pulling out her intestines while the others look on in shock. It's absolutely disgusting, but the three of them pass the intestines around the room, successfully wrapping them around the cart and using them as a rope for the doctor to pull her phone closer, and quickly calls someone to come to their rescue, but doesn't get too far into the conversation before Amanda shocks her with an electrified collar, taking the phone and placing it further out of reach. While checking the security cameras, Amanda realizes that they have an unexpected visitor. It's Parker, another one of their scam victims. He breaks into the factory, carefully making his way through the halls until he's distracted by a decoy made with Valentina's body, and Amanda suddenly ambushes him from behind, knocking him out cold. When he wakes up, Parker finds himself restrained to a chair up in the observation room. John spins him around to look at the cameras while he explains what he and Amanda have been up to, promising him that he'll get his money back as long as he plays along, and lets the others finish their game. He says that he'll give Parker his chance at revenge too, but makes him promise that he won't use guns, adding that the consequences for breaking the rules will not be good. Matteo is up next, and Amanda goes back down to the factory floor to get everything ready, knocking him out with a taser straight to the face. A short while later, Matteo awakens to find himself strapped to a wheelchair. Looking around, he sees a screen showing that the top of his head has been shaved, as if to prepare him for the surgery that John was supposed to have. The tape explains that he'll need to use the tools given to him to remove pieces of his brain and place the chunks into a nearby beaker that's full of enzymes. If he acts quickly, enough of the brain matter will dissolve before the timer runs out, unlocking the key that will set him free. Otherwise, the mask will close around his face, and I all think we know what happens after that. The timer starts, leaving Matteo only 3 minutes to save himself. He hesitates at first, but after some encouragement from the others, he finally gathers his courage enough to get started. Taking an electric cutter in his left hand, he begins slicing into the back of his own skull, shouting in agony as he slowly cuts through the bone. He's finally able to remove the section of his scalp, exposing the brain underneath, but that was just the easy part. He reaches up and painfully yanks out a wriggling section of his brain, dropping it into the beaker. Now, all that he can do is wait as the enzymes begin to dissolve the material, but he took too long to start, and time is about to run out. Before he's able to get to the key, the countdown reaches 0. 2 sets of exposed capables built into the mask begin to glow red hot, and the device snaps shut around his face, brutally killing him just when it looked like he might have succeeded. That makes 2 scammers down, with 2 more to go. Okay, man, talk about a splitting headache. Not only did he get one of the most brutal challenges, but it's also the most brutal death so far. That's a tough break for Matteo here. Maybe he should have stuck to his career as a vet and not tried to branch out into scamming dying cancer patients. You know what I mean? Just like Valentina, he's another victim who, in the end, did everything right, but just didn't act quickly enough to save his own life. It seems like the best chance to survive is fully commit and get it over with as quickly as possible, but good luck with that. Getting only 2 minutes to cut out a whole chunk of your brain is pretty crazy, even by Jigsaw's standards. To make things even worse, he was barely even given a chance to get his bearings because the timer started on its own. As mentioned, it's true that most people can survive with as much as half of their brain missing. The area of the brain in particular that Matteo had to cut out is called the parietal lobe, and is responsible for processing your senses, which means that even if he did succeed, he'd probably never be the same afterwards. Removing a portion of the skull is called a craniotomy, and is one of the most difficult types of surgeries to perform, even for trained medical professionals. It can lead to severe complications if not done correctly, including death, obviously. As always, we can start by prioritizing the threats. What was going to kill him here was the mask closing in on his face. One thing that he had going for him was that electric drill. If it was strong enough to cut through his skull, then he might have been able to use it to damage the trap, or to get to the key. I'd suggest looking for wires that seem important and damaging them, or going straight for the padlock that's holding him in. It might also be possible to use the drill or some other pointed object to simply break the glass and get the key. If all else fails, then he would have had no choice besides playing by the rules. There's only 2 scammers left to go, and so far, nobody has managed to survive. We'll have to see if Gabriella or the doctor has what it takes, but there's going to be some unexpected problems before the end. Upstairs, John tells Amanda to set Parker free, saying that it's time to put him to the test. As for the scammers, the next one up on the chopping block is Gabriella. She takes the tape player and begins listening to the rules, but becomes so overpowered by fear that she throws it aside, refusing to play. That's when John comes over the speakers, saying that, unfortunately for her, sitting this one out isn't going to be an option. Suddenly, the 2 chains wrapped around her wrist and ankle begin to pull tight, hoisting her up into the air several feet above the ground. When it finally stops, she's directly in the line of fire of a giant radiation machine. She'll need to use a sledgehammer to set herself free before the machine reaches full power, slowly killing her from the radiation burns. There's no time limit on this one, but if she doesn't act fast, she's going to be cooked alive. As the radiation slowly gets more and more intense, Gabriella takes the hammer and begins smashing her ankle over and over again, finally breaking it enough that she slips free of the cuff. For a moment, it looks like she's just swung out of the machine's range, but John's already thought of that, and it turns to get her body in its sights once again, doubling the intensity as blisters start to form all over her body. Desperate to escape, Gabriella begins striking at her wrist, pulverizing the bones until her arm also slips free. The girl is in unbelievable pain, but she's just survived, and John tells Amanda to go take her to the hospital. That makes 2 scammers down, with 1 survivor, and 1 more left to go. Okay, it looks like Gabriella here gets to join Diego in the Jigsaw Trap Survivor Hall of Fame. John must have felt bad for her because honestly, he went easy here compared to the others. Before her game even started, Gabriella had plenty of time while the others were being tested, where she could have tried to find what the chain around her ankle was attached to on the other end and possibly gotten it loose, although that would probably take some serious tools and no small amount of luck. In this case, the danger here was the radiation burns that she'd suffer from prolonged exposure to the machine.
Whoa, what'd that do?
I don't know.
And the only way to avoid a slow and painful death was to get out of its range. Breaking her ankle first seemed like the smart choice because she could swing out of the way, but the machine just turned to follow her. There was really no way to predict that this was going to happen, but in hindsight, it might have been better to go with her wrist first, because then she would have just fallen straight back down, although there's the risk that she'd be knocked out on impact. She was actually about to go for her wrist first until the doctor stopped her. The top half of her body was being hit with the radiation, while the bottom half was not. So maybe that could have been her reason for going for the wrist instead. Of all the challenges so far, breaking your wrist and ankle really isn't that bad by comparison. And she was even given a sledgehammer to do it. Perhaps she could have tried hurling the hammer at the radiation machine itself to break it, but that would still leave her stranded up in the air, and also without a tool to get free, so that's probably not the best idea. Once she got her ankle free, it's possible that Gabriella could have reached up and grabbed the chain with her other arm, so that she could either swing to safety or pull herself up towards the ceiling, where she may have been able to get out of the burn range. She may have cut it close, but in the end, she's one of the very few people who actually managed to survive their trap. Let's just hope that nothing terrible happens before she's able to get to medical attention. While John and Amanda have their guard down, Parker over here grabs his handgun from the locker and points it straight at them, demanding that they hand over the keys to the doctor's restraints. John reminds him that he's making a big mistake, but the man refuses to listen, ordering the 2 of them down to the factory floor. It turns out that Parker and the doctor here have been secret lovers all along, and he's also been in on the scam the whole time, playing the role of the double agent until he saw his opportunity to take control. After setting Cecilia free, he orders John to take her place in the trap instead, which he reluctantly agrees to do, placing the collar around his neck and using the key to lock it shut. John pleads with them to take Gabriella to the hospital, saying that she deserves to live. But the doctor here has other plans. While the others look on, she stomps down on the back of Gabriella's neck, coldly killing her without so much as a second thought. That makes 3 scammers down with 2 more to go. The psychos force Amanda to chain herself up as well, but John quietly gives her a look that makes it seem like he somehow still has everything under control. Now that she has them both restrained, the doctor takes her moment to gloat, insulting John for falling for her scam and saying that she was happy to see the others die, as it means that she won't have to split the money with anyone but her man. She admits that she was nervous for a second, but in the end, she managed to outsmart the legendary Jigsaw himself. Now he's going to die in one of his own traps, or at least that's what she thinks. They're about to strap Amanda to the other end of the device, but just then, they hear something bouncing against the outside wall. It's Carlos, a young boy from the villa, playing with his soccer ball, and this gives the doctor a devilish idea. Going out to meet him, she lures Carlos inside and places him into the trap across from John instead, saying that she's going to make him suffer by forcing him to choose whose life to save, his own or the innocent boy's. John pleads with them to reconsider, but it's clear that he's not getting anywhere. Instead, he turns to the boy and explains that whatever happens, he cannot pull the lever on his side of the device. At the doctor's command, Parker fires up the machine. Suddenly, the chains around their necks pull John and the boy down to the floor, pinning them in place as the platform rises up towards 2 ominous-looking devices. The test begins, and leaders of of blood start pouring out from the spigot, threatening to drown them both in a matter of minutes. Reaching for the lever, John pulls it back, lifting Carlos's side into the air as his end of the machine tilts downwards, killing him even more quickly while allowing the boy to breathe. Even Parker here thinks that this is a bit too much to stomach, so the two of them leave to get the money from the observation room before the game is over. But that was their biggest mistake. Just as he begins to realize that something about this doesn't seem quite right, Cecilia grabs the bag full of money from its hiding place above the lockers. And that's when John's real plan falls into action, and a red warning light activates as a timer on the wall begins to count down. It turns out that there was never any money in that bag at all, only more evidence of all the people who Cecilia and her team of scammers robbed blind. This was John's final trap. And as Cecilia and Parker realize that they're totally screwed, the device holding John and Carlos shuts off, setting them both free. The truth is that John knew about Parker's involvement all along after getting the information from Diego. While the man was asleep, he removed the gunpowder from all of the handgun ammunition, and now the last two scammers will have to play their final game. Okay, just when they thought they'd actually gotten the upper hand on old John Kramer, we get the dramatic reveal that he's been playing them like a fiddle all along. I think that reality is starting to set in, but in case it wasn't completely obvious by now, Cecilia and Parker, you f***ed up! I have to say, John has put some pretty seedy characters to the test over the years, but these two might just be the biggest scumbags of all. Scamming people out of their hard-earned money is a shifty enough move as it is, but choosing people who are literally dying as their target just to take advantage of the only hope that they have left? That's scummy on a whole nother level. There's a special place in hell reserved for those two, but before they can get there, they're gonna have to deal with John first. You may think that you have it all figured out, but never forget that Jigsaw is always one step ahead. Instead of gloating in his face and going back for the money, the only chance that these two would have had is if they just decided to leave. But their greed got the better of them and they walked right into the trap. I mean, seriously, did they really think that John would just tell them exactly where the money is and then leave it in there unbooby-trapped? Come on, who do they think they're dealing with here? Cecilia herself said that she got nervous when she realized who John really was, and boy oh boy, she should have trusted her instincts on that one. Despite everything, they almost went down as the couple who got the better of Jigsaw, but now they're just going to end up as the latest in the long list of his highly deserving victims. Congratulations, Cecilia and Parker, you two f***ed all the way up. The room begins to flood with poison gas, with a hole opening in the wall where they can access fresh air, but it's only big enough for one of them. Panicking, Parker starts trying to break through the windows, but it's no use. Instead, he turns his attention towards Cecilia, dragging her back out of the hole. The two begin to fight to the death, turning on each other just like John knew they always would, until Cecilia is able to overpower him, landing the killing blow. Downstairs, John gives Carlos all of the money that the scammers stole, and he and Amanda go to take the boy home, leaving Cecilia stranded there on the second floor. That makes 4 scammers down with 2 survivors, but there's still one more loose end for John to tie up. Back in the States, John and his partner, Detective Hoffman, track down Henry, the so-called survivor, who lured John into this scheme in the first place, and place him into a trap of his own. It's left unknown whether he lives or dies, but one thing's for sure, he's learned an important lesson. If you're going to scam someone, make damn sure that it isn't John Kramer. But what would you guys do? And as bad as this sounds, if you were going around scamming cancer patients, don't you think you would eventually run into a mastermind who would see through your wicked ways and tie you to a machine that would cut your head off for your sins? I do. That's just karma right there. Let us know down in the comments below what you would have done in some of these traps. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a like and subscribe, and check out that How to Beat playlist for more videos just like this one. And we'll see you in the next video. Have a damn good day.